welcome Rogers viewers to Health Matters. You've tuned in to Wellness Changing Steps, and the reason this show is entitled Mental Wellness Changing Steps is because we're focused on building healthy communities, and part of building healthy communities is supporting the growth of healthy community members throughout the lifespan, and mental health is an important part holistically of our health. And Changing Steps is the name of my private practice, and I named it that because change happens in our lives in incremental steps. We would really love to have big things happen in, all at once. I want to lose 15 pounds in 1 week, or I want to get over my anxiety of picking up the phone and, asking if an employer is hiring. But we usually have to break those tasks into little steps. So this show focuses on things that we can do to support community members, things that we can do to support our community. I'm really blessed to have producer Rye Howitt here in the studio, and we also have Sharon Charles on camera. Thank you, Sharon. And without volunteers like Sharon, this show wouldn't happen. So thank you so much, and thanks Rogers Television for bringing these kind of topics to the community. So today we're focusing on children, between the ages of, say, 5 to 12, who struggle with issues of anxiety and depression, and I'm really lucky to have my colleague here, Nicole Perryman, in the studio with me, who is well known in the field of mental health, working with children and youth and working on these topics. And I met this lovely lady in the play therapy world because she's also a certified child psychotherapist, play therapist with the Canadian Association of Child and Play Therapy, as I am. But you do all sorts of things, Miss Nicole. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yes, thank you. My name is Nicole Perryman, and I am a registered social worker as well as a child and family play therapist. Right. So I work with children from age 3 to adults, as well as couples and families, supporting them with a range of difficulties from, basic issues and challenges within relationships to anxiety, depression, and serious mental health issues.
Right. And the other thing that I know you've done over the years, which is so needed, is groups for young women.
Yes, I do.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's a unique service, and it's so needed.
In 2007, I started a girls group at the agency that we worked at, Branching Out, and I just continued working with teens and girls. The group is now called Nia Gwenda, and it supports girls from 11 to 19 years old. We actually have one group running right now with 5 girls, and the focus goes from anything from helping them with anxiety, depression, to social media, understanding relationships with peers and with family. And it's just a great place where girls come and they feel comfortable to talk about their life experiences and what's been happening and just meet new people.
And you were also fostering some culturally specific groups.
Yes, I was. So a lot of the groups are specific to youth culture, African Canadian culture, just specific to what the girls need in their life. So.
Which is, and we didn't talk about this before we started this morning, so I'm kind of putting Nicole on the spot, but I just realized I saw your name on a pretty important document recently.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So along with some colleagues with the Ontario Association for Children Aid Societies, we put together a document called One Vision, One Voice, which focuses on interventions for children in care, African Canadian children in care, and how to best support them in the foster home and the child welfare system. The reason the study or the framework came out was because of the experiences of African Canadian youth and families who were disproportionately involved in Children's Aid Society, and their outcomes in terms of being able to have jobs or good mental health and other outcomes were very poor. So they decided to put together this framework as a way of guiding child welfare workers and educational professionals and people that work with the community in terms of how to best support them and how to help them achieve those outcomes.
And our viewers probably have seen some of those stats and articles in the media recently, because there's a closer kind of look we're really looking more closely at the number of youth from Caribbean and African backgrounds that are in care. And in one of the other hats I wear that I've mentioned in previous shows is I'm also a therapeutic foster parent. So I have a Caribbean son and I have an African son. I know my husband's actually taking 2 of the kids to an African dance class today, and we do African drumming. But we try our best, but we're not of African culture, so it's so important for that work is so important, not only for foster parents and the youth, but for the bigger communities. And when we look at the Peel region where this show is airing, we're a very multicultural community, both in Brampton and in Mississauga and Caledon. Yeah. So that work, thank you. So on behalf of child and youth care practitioners and foster parents and therapists, thank you so much for that work, because it's going to be referenced not only for years to come, but you have contributed to making great change in terms of understanding the issues. So that's awesome. But you volunteered so kindly your time today to come and talk about your work with children who are experiencing mental health issues in regards to, and the most common ones that we hear about is, I don't know about you and your practice, but in my practice, I hear parents expressing concern about anxiety and expressing concern about depression.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about what are you seeing? What are you doing? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I see the same thing. Usually as young as 3 years old, and children having anxiety in terms of going to school in the mornings, to behavior, temper tantrums at nighttime, and trying to understand, where this behavior is coming from. A lot of times I think, we live in such a busy society where people are always on the go, moving, and there's a lot of emphasis on, performance and competition, and that a lot becomes difficult for a lot of children who have a hard time with that. And so those are the types of children that I see is children who, they want to do well, but they're struggling with that piece, or they're struggling with anxiety or fears about, dying, and fears and worries about family members passing away. Phobias around as small as, spiders, to phobias about, not wanting to go out in public, or not wanting to go to school. So those are some of the challenges that I see every day. And it, stems from very young as 3, 4, when they're starting kindergarten, to, older teens who are much older and having difficulty in terms of getting to school and being able to do well in academics as well.
So as you were talking, I was thinking, I've always said when I grow up I want to be a school trustee and have some power to look at the school system, because I think about when grade 3 and 6 testing came in. Yes. And oh man, I had, one of my kids had diagnosed anxiety at that point, and first week of school it was a list coming home of what the kids are going to need in order to be successful in the grade 3 testing that wasn't happening until April. Exactly. I think it was April. And I finally said to the teacher, we're not going to worry about this because he's not going to come. And at the time it was new, and she said, oh, but he has to come. I said, no, testing's really for the school. It's not really for my child. They're not being marked on it. And I really think if we can take that off the table and just have him go to school trying to learn the best that he can. And I'd really rather in grade 3 the focus be friendships and respect and contributing to the learning community versus worrying about getting an A. But I think it worries me that sometimes in our pressure to be having testing for funding, that we're also kind of reinforcing those anticipatory anxiety behaviors.
Yes, absolutely. I think the standard question I ask youth who are in grade 6 is, okay, when you're starting the EQO testing, because they've already started in like September, October, like you said, right?
Prepping them.
And, also too, as they emerge into high school, my daughter has experience where teachers tell them, like, if you don't do this, get this grade, that you're not going to go into university and you're not going to accomplish things. And
your life's over. What? Oh my gosh.
Why are you telling them this? Because it's not true, right? And so it's like we build ingrain in our society around pressures and forcing our children to live up to this ideal, which, in the greater scheme of things, it's not the big deal.
And what do you see about depression in terms of referrals? Do you see kids with clinical depression symptoms, or do you think are parents contacting you or your colleagues or your supervisees, because I know you're also a supervisor, contacting them with like the beginning symptoms of depression, or are you seeing more of a trend of we're creating kids who don't have the coping strategies to manage with the blues and the things
Right.
that are bugging them.
I think they go hand in hand, anxiety and depression. So I see some children who have the behavior difficulties, which parents don't always know it's anxiety, they're just seeing the behavior. And when you're unpacking some of that anxiety, you're also understanding that there is some depression that they've been dealing with or struggling with, right?
So that's really key. We should stop and look at that for a sec. So what could be described by a teacher at school as defiance,
Right.
or refusal to follow directions, or being really slow in the morning and not wanting to get to school on time, which then makes mom and dad late and then creates parent-child conflict. Some of that behavior is masking the anxiety
Absolutely.
of okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which I think the first instinct is, you want to punish that behavior or curb that behavior, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I see a lot. In terms of the depression, usually around, I see 12, 13-year-olds who preteen age where they're, starting to develop their own independence and social connections with other people. And, a lot of youth around those ages experience bullying or experience those pressures, and they don't always have the skills to manage what's going on for them. And so that's kind of when the depression starts to kick in, as well as anxiety. So really, the two of them go hand in hand.
So would you, in terms of symptoms for preteens around depression, if I'm a parent watching and I have some concerns, what kind of symptoms might I see? It might be, I guess, kids sleeping too much, not sleeping the way they normally were.
Yeah, eating patterns are off. Some of the language that they say, I'm not good, I'm not worthy. Just not being able to handle regular everyday stress. You're looking at school refusal if they're refusing to go to school.
Right.
Long periods in the room. A lot of teens do spend time in their room, but if they're doing that consistently over and over again, you want to be concerned about that. Change in friends, how they appear, just changes in their day-to-day life that's a bit different, right? And
which is, and as you're saying all that, I think to the viewers at home that are maybe struggling. I'm a parent on my own, or my partner and I are parenting, and we, our work schedules are flipped upside down, or I have shift work. Gone are the days where families can share every single meal every day together.
Yes, absolutely.
So it might be hard for some of our viewers to be able to recognize those shifts in regular day-to-day routines. And it's really so hard as a parent to find those moments during the day where you can say, hey, what's going on at school?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of parents, they feel guilty because, they've found out that their child has been struggling with anxiety or has been bullied for a long period of time and they didn't know.
And they weren't aware.
Right? And a lot of, our children do want to be able to appear that they're doing well, and they don't always want to let their parents know that they're struggling because it's their feeling of shame around, that piece. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for those examples. I'm sure that resonated with some of our viewers who are watching. So I'm going to invite you to grab yourself a cup of coffee or a glass of water. We're going to just go to break and then come back and join us again. And we're going to talk with Nicole around what kind of strategies she can provide in the therapy room for your child, as well as strategies she can recommend to families to support their children. Thanks a lot. Welcome back to Health Matters. This is Mental Wellness Changing Steps. Thank you so much for coming back. If you're just joining us, I'm very pleased to have in the studio with me today Nicole Perryman, who is a registered social worker in the province of Ontario and also a registered psychotherapist. And we also share the designation of certified play therapist, soon to be certified play therapist supervisor.
Hope so.
Yes, for sure. And Nicole and I have just been talking about children experiencing anxiety symptoms and depression and signs and symptoms that families might see that might precipitate them to saying, let's get some support. So let's go right there. So if we hear about mental wellness and mental health issues in media, we hear about it on TV. I think in the Peel region, we're really trying, whether it's through print or video or radio to kind of destigmatize, what what mental health challenges are for families and also children and just individuals. But it's really hard when you're a parent and you're trying to just get through day to day and also keep track of, your little person's becoming a teenager. And I know for me as a parent, I really struggled with our kids going from the grade school to the high school, because your relationship and ability to be part of that school community shifts as well, because there's so many more players. And, I often hear from teachers, well, we're trying to teach them independence. And as the parent, I'm saying, great, but I want to know there's a problem early so we can plug in resources. So if we get to the point as a parent where our viewers say, yeah, you know what, my 8-year-old or my 9-year-old, it's more than just a little bit of nervousness. We're really having school refusal or school avoidance. Or we're not wanting to leave the house. And often I think many people, the first stop will be to go to the doctor for many people. And then I know lots of families that approach me that say, yeah, I don't want the first stop to be the doctor because I'm really worried about medication. And I don't want that to be the first intervention that we use. Some families will go to a naturopath. But if they actually get to the therapy room, what would I be able to expect as a parent if I contact you and say, and I'm lucky enough to not have to be on your waiting list and I can get an appointment, what could I expect?
The first you can expect is that we're going to go through a whole history and just understand what's happening with your child, what's happened in your family, because there are other issues or challenges that may have come up over the years that may have impacted your child. And then we're going to talk about, what would be a good intervention. So there are some, interventions that we use most of the time with children to help them manage their anxiety much better than how they were doing before, as well as we do some of that teaching as well, and do some play and do some art, as well as having some test kind of check in with the parents in terms of how things are going. So I'm also going to give parents homework in terms of what they can do in the home, how they can support their child, and then we're following up on a regular basis to see how things are going.
So what would be an example of homework?
So some homeworks the first session is usually around, let's just track what's happening. So it's encouraging the parents to track, what happens during their day, what happens when their child has a meltdown or having something difficult happen. If they can note any feelings that they notice with their child throughout the day and encourage their child to talk about it. So we do a lot of tracking. The second step is just around, when something happens, so when a behavior happens where the child has a tantrum because they've had a busy day and they're feeling super anxious, spending some time with their child let's talk about what's happened. Let's talk about the reasons that happened, how you were feeling, and what other solutions we can think of. So very concrete ways of kind of addressing anxiety. We also want to encourage parents to encourage their children to be good detectives. So being able to understand, okay, where are your thoughts? I'm
smiling because I use that word all the time too.
Where are your thoughts coming from? What kinds of thoughts do you have circling around your head? What is true? What is kind of not so true? What's the evidence around how you're thinking? Just so they can be able to look at their issues or whatever they're thinking about differently in a better light. We encourage parents a lot to, when their child has difficulties or is having a difficult day, not to try and rescue and protect and kind of cover them up with their
so
protective love. Yeah,
I don't want my baby to suffer at all.
I know, which is great. We all don't want our children to suffer, but the reality is that, we do experience pain. Our children experience pain as well.
Right.
And so our goal is around teaching them how to cope with that pain and not always feel that they have to, push it away or push it aside, but be able to face it and address it. I encourage parents to be good modelers. So when they have stressful days or when things are going awry, just being able to model that to your children and say, okay, this is part of life. It happens. Here's the solutions I'm going to do. Here's what I'm thinking in my head that's bothering me. And here's how I'm trying to figure it out or manage it. So
that's that in itself is $100 nugget for a family, because I think of in my work with adoptive families, when I do the intake, I'll say, do you ever argue in front of your child? And they all go, oh no, we never argue. And I go, every couple argues, every family has conflict, and whether it's who didn't take the garbage out, or how are we going to pay this bill, or we got to be in two places at one time, how are we going to manage that? And so many families and parents really want to protect the child by not letting on that there's any problems going on. But you're right. And I say the same thing. It's when you're arguing it in conflict, you don't have to be throwing chairs and swearing and be misogynistic or disparaging. It can just be, I'm really angry right now and I need some space. Or, so I'll say to families, we need to come up with what are the rules of engagement?
Yes,
how are we going to
exactly.
talk with each other? And what are the rules around having conflict? And at what point do you have, how do you manage conflict with your child?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you teach your children skills, right? And the hope is that when they are at school or with they're engaging with other people, they're using the same language or using the same behaviors, right?
And what about when we look at depression? Because the stigma around depression, I mean, anxiety, there's stigma attached to that too. But I think depression sometimes, because we just, when you're feeling really depressed, it's hard to reach out.
Yes,
First of all, it's hard to
absolutely.
recognize you're depressed.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to reach out.
Absolutely. I think the huge piece, in speaking with people who have experienced depression, is around the validation piece, right? It's so important to validate how they're feeling, even if it doesn't sound like it's right or it's kind of off. You just have to validate them, because what they're feeling in their experience is so intense that it's hard for them to see past it. So I think validating your child's or teen's experience is really important, as well as just spending time with them. Getting to know what's happening for them, getting to know their friends, getting to know some of the challenges they experience day to day. What are their thoughts? Because a lot of times our thoughts kind of are so important in how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about other people.
Absolutely.
So spending that time with them just to understand, how they're thinking, what's happening for them in their world.
And sometimes there's events that they're experiencing that do precipitate and predispose depression, like breaking up with when not necessarily little people, but little people, my friends moved away. The very best friend I've had for 3 years has moved away. That's a really big event and a big reason for depression. Grief and loss too, when kids lose, whether it's a pet or a teacher that's gone on leave or a friend moving away. Those things really can predispose those symptoms that sometimes as adults we take for granted they're going to bounce back from more quickly than maybe one child will and another won't.
Right, absolutely. They often say, they'll get over it, right? They're really young when it happened. And, the funny thing is that your brain never forgets difficult experiences. And I also encourage parents, to teach their children coping skills or soothing skills, self-soothing skills. So when I have a bad day, I run a tub and I have a bathtub, I have candles, and I just relax. And do that for your children. Encourage your children to soothe themselves, right? And to be able to understand that pain is there, it's going to happen, but you can still feel better in the moment, right?
And in terms of it, you've just brought up such a great point. In terms of behavior guidance, I know when I started in this field as a child and youth care practitioner and did school, we focused so much on school on behavior management. And the term now we're shifting from that to behavior guidance, which I think really intuitively speaks to we're not, as parents or adults, controlling. We're really, our goal is to guide children to manage through things. But I can remember in my early years in the field really thinking about, as you talked earlier, about the consequences, right? So if a child's refusing to go to school, you're going to owe time back after school, or if a child refuses to do this. And so it was always about that versus, I think the most valuable statement that I use probably a couple of times a day with different kids is, what do you need right now?
Right.
Absolutely. What do you think you need right now? Because your behavior is telling me that you're feeling really upset or you're really sad. What do you need to not take that away? Because we can't always take away those feelings, even though as parents we want to protect them. But how can we help them manage, whether it's a tub or just spending time alone, or I just need to sit on your lap and cuddle, even though I'm a 14-year-old girl or boy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And at what point do you think it's important for parents to connect with other folks in the child's life? So at what point do I say to my child's teacher, my child's really having a hard time with grade 3 testing or grade 6 testing, or her body's starting to change and she's feeling really uncomfortable going into the gym, changing before gym. At what point do we need to have those discussions? And then I guess my next question was, what would you recommend how we do that? Because it's not, I find as a parent, it's not the old days where I could just walk in the school and I have to push a buzzer, I got to make a phone. And if I phone the school, I may not even get a live person on the line.
Right.
I have to leave a message. It's really hard to connect with all the other important players in our children's life. But at what point do we have to say, okay, we have to do this?
I think in the very beginning when you're starting to notice that there's difficulties. You know, I usually start with have the conversation with your child to say you're concerned and that you're wanting to provide them greater support within their life, right? And part of that is school.
So they don't feel like you're doing it without their involvement.
So talk to them about, you know, what would be helpful in school for you? What do you think you would need? So for example, for the young person who doesn't want to change in front of everybody, you can talk about solutions about how to do that.
Okay.
Right? And then the other piece, as you said, I mean, is contacting the school, contacting the teacher or the guidance counselor. Some schools are connected with a social worker, so being able to maintain that contact and kind of advocate for your child in that way, right? Okay. Don't always expect your child to be the one to talk to the teacher, because sometimes that's very anxiety provoking for them, right? So being able to take that first step in connecting with, you know, the person at the child's school to support and advocate for them.
So that there's a team of folks around.
Exactly.
So which is really what we're talking about is, again, healthy communities.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's creating a healthy community. Well, our time is up. I just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. And if viewers want to contact you directly, we're going to have your contact information come up on the screen and your website information. And there's also, we would say the Children's Helpline is available for children who may be watching. And if you're a little person watching and your mom or dad is in the room and some of this has made you think, I feel like I need some help, make sure you tell your mom or dad. First person to go to, mom or dad, and then they'll connect you with other helpers in the community that can help you feel better and manage some of the struggles that you're having. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would say that's a wrap.
Thanks.
Yeah.